Hello coaches, and welcome to this final presentation in the series Formations and Systems 11 versus 11. And this is our review session when we're going to look at the 4 systems that we've introduced and look at them from an opposed perspective. And I'm joined by my colleague Ian Barker. Hello Ian.
Hello David, it's a pleasure to be here for the review.
Thanks, Ian. So let's go straight into the first part of the review, which is looking at the basic numbering system as it pertains to the 1433, the 1352, the 1451, and finally the 1442. Ian, this is your formation, so if you'd like to pick up from here.
Sure, thank you, David. In the 1433, I've been able to assign all 11 numbers, so we don't have any doubled up. We don't have 2 number 9s and sacrifice a center back or any such type organization. And the key here from my perspective is obviously how do you employ your back 4 defensively and offensively? What is the configuration of the 3 midfielders? Could it be a triangle with 1 deep, 2 high, or 2 deep and 1 high, or do you have them somewhat flat? And then what is the configuration of the 3 forwards? Obviously you're going to have a central striker, but are the 7 and 11s very wide? Are they pinched in? But from a player development point of view, the 4-3-3 remains a very favored formation for the development of young players, and certainly it's employed a lot at the senior level, be that the highest levels of professional, all the way down through the amateur ranks.
So Ian, the second system that we looked at, the formation, we looked at the 1-3-5-2. This was one that I presented. And here we introduced multiple lines of the team, the goalkeeping line, the defensive line with the 3 central backs, 2 and 3 playing relatively narrow when we are out of possession and playing much more expansive when we're in possession. And then we looked at the role of the 7 and 11 playing high up in a starting position to try and support the 2 number 9s, with the number 6 adding a defensive shield to the back 3, and then the 10 and the number 8 moving into high positions when we have possession.
And then moving to the 4-5-1, one of the formations I was asked to present on. Again, unlike David's presentation of the 3-5-2 and Paul's presentation of the 4-4-2, I've been able to use all 11 of the numbers and not had to double up some and sacrifice others. So once again, the configuration of the back 4, we are in a modern game where traditionally the 2 center backs play side by side. We're not really playing with stoppers and sweepers so much in the modern game. Additionally, the 5-man midfield almost certainly means that we're going to have width through 7 and 11. And we then oppose the same question as before in the 4-3-3. How do we align those 3 central midfielders? And of course, key to the 4-5-1 will be the abilities and physical abilities, as well as technical, tactical abilities and psychological willingness of your number 9 to carry the line by his or herself. So quite an interesting formation and how it's employed as a system.
And the 4th formation that we looked at was the 1-4-4-2. That was presented by Paul Marco, and today I will take this formation as we look at it in an opposed environment. In Paul's presentation, he talked about a back 4 traditionally with the number 2 and the number 3 providing width in this interpretation. But what was unusual or unique about his interpretation of the central midfield was the involvement of 2 number 8 and the number 10 playing very narrow in the central midfield, creating a diamond, with the number 6 providing the base of the diamond. And then as numbered here, the 2 number 9s essentially providing the same functionality. And as we'll talk about when we look at the defensive shape of this team, the number 9s, if you recall, were moving back to provide some level of defensive cover as they drop back and follow the fullbacks of the opponent. So Ian, now let's talk about the attacking and defending features of each of those formations briefly, because we've already covered this before. Let's take just one example that we want to highlight, and we'll start with your 1-4-3-3.
Sure. Well, hopefully the full presentation of just about an hour's length was helpful to coaches. But in this review session, when I think about the 1-4-3-3, and I think about, and this could arguably be on the attacking or defending side of it, but I'm particularly interested in the ability of 9, 7, 9, and 11 to effectively press the ball should we lose it up high. So the idea of this counter press is the notion that we've been attacking with good numbers, certainly 3 engaged strikers, and then what could be happening behind us with 8 and 10 and possibly our fullbacks. But should we lose it, can we immediately get back onto the offensive by pressing high again with 7, 9, and 11? So I would consider this almost an attacking feature of the 1-4-3-3, this ability for a very high counter press. When I look at the defending side of things, from my perspective, a key, and this is a fairly common key in the modern game, is the value of the number 6. I'm going to put a couple of arrows on my number 6 just to emphasize how important I think this player is in the 1-4-3-3. And that is the player that maybe is not going to get quite all the accolades for goal scoring and assists and really clever play, but is the player that protects the service or defends the service into the opposing strikers and provides protection to the 4 and 5. The value of the number 6, therefore, is to allow 2 and 3 to go out wide to engage as and when they need to, because the number 6 is the stay-at-home deep central midfielder. So I think in my interpretation of the 1-4-3-3, a really critical player in the entire defensive scheme.
And Ian, to add further support to the role of the number 6, I think it's consistent in all 4 formations that we included the number 6 as a screening or more defensive player.
Absolutely. I would say that, you know, beyond the goalkeeper as a number 1 and the values of a striker, the number 9, probably the most commonly understood position in the modern game is the defensive central midfielder. So I think it's a really critical role to explore within your team.
And in the 1-3-5-2, the one aspect that I'd like to emphasize from my original presentation was the starting positions of the 7 and the 11 when we have possession of the ball in our defensive line, whether that be the goalkeeper or the 2, the 3, or the 4. And what I would like to see as best as possible is to see the number 7 and 11 getting beyond the midfield line so that they are in support of the strikers, the number 9s, as soon as possible. And that gives us the opportunity to get the ball forward, get it in high positions, and then hopefully retain possession in a much higher position. When we look at the defending side of the ball, the feature that I'd like to highlight here is the importance of keeping the 2, the 3, and the 4 in close contact, but not so narrow that we expose ourselves dramatically in wide positions. And that is certainly going to be the challenge for us defensively, is how do we defend in the wide positions when the opponent has wide players against us. And as we see with some teams at the professional level, they do a really good job of making their 3-back line look a lot bigger and a lot wider than necessarily they are and can cope with. So that would certainly be the feature I would look at in terms of the defending side of the 1-3-5-2 in the 1-4-5-1 attacking.
Thank you. So again, this is the review session, the about 1 hour of content exclusively on the 1-4-5-1. Hopefully will be much deeper content. But when we look at this formation and system, there's a belief sometimes or an understanding that maybe just with one central striker, this is a very defensive formation. I could make the argument against that by suggesting that with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 midfielders supported or covered by a back 4, the opportunities to run people forward from different positions is really high. And particularly, we have the opportunity to attack with 7 and 11 supported by 2 and 3, but we also have the ability to run forward from 8 and 10 supported by 6. So I think this particular formation, as it's employed as a system, allows us for very clear opportunities for attacking both centrally and wide. I feel it's a very balanced attacking formation from that perspective, whereas other formations do tend to suggest either more through the center or more through the wide space. I think this one is a much nicer balanced one, in my opinion. And then when I look at this from a defending point of view, and the reason that I've sometimes used this with college teams I've worked with and so on and so forth is that it is a very compact defensive opportunity in the 4 and the 5, with the central striker doing whatever role he or she is asked to do. And if you drop this particular formation quite deep, when let's say you're holding on to a lead, it becomes incredibly difficult to penetrate and very frustrating for an opponent. So you can quite effectively park the bus should you be trying to close out a lead. However, if for whatever reason you decide you want to press high, make the pressure more immediate, and perhaps because you're trailing in the game or there's only minutes left, I think you can see how this entire block of players here could be shifted up the field to provide closer support to the number 9, and we can counter from it. So I quite like this formation. I think it can be interpreted in different ways, and I don't think it's an exclusively negative formation by any means.
And the 1-4-4-2 presented by Paul Marco. This is an interesting interpretation given the narrowness of the diamond in the central midfield provided by the 6, the 8, the 10, and the other number 8. And as a result, he has suggested that the width provided by this team can be provided by an alternating character and cast of characters, not just as we would traditionally see maybe a 7 and an 11 coming forward. So in this interpretation, the number 2 might be able to provide width, certainly the number 8 and the number 10 moving into wide spaces, but also, of course, we can have the central strikers, the 9 and the 10, particularly because there's now 2 of them up front to provide that width. So an interesting suggestion on providing width from different players. And then on the other side of the ball, the defending side, we have the strikers picking up the opponent's fullbacks. So what Paul had suggested, if you recall, is that as the ball is moved wide, so essentially playing around the outside of the diamond, the number 9s will be responsible for tracking back the opponent's fullbacks and potentially their wide midfield players. So as these number 9s drop back, then the height in the team for the counter-attack is provided by other players, which we'll get to very soon. So now, Ian, what we're going to do is talk about how these systems now start to oppose each other. And we could probably spend days talking about this. So what we've done is we're going to provide an analysis and a scenario for each team in an attacking versus a defending scenario, and pose to each other one question that hopefully we'll be able to respond to on the fly as we start to think about ways that we could break down the opponent. So Ian, I know that you're up first, 1-4-3-3 attacking against my 1-3-5-2 defending.
So if I'm looking at my team here being the red team, there's the ball. My curiosity for you, David, is given that you're playing with 3 defenders, which I assume will have to be set up initially quite narrow, how do you prevent my 7 and 11 giving my team good width and your team not turning out into a back 5? How do you prevent your 3-5-2 from turning into a back 5 when I'm playing in a 4-3-3?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of ways to answer this question. Firstly, playing with 3 at the back, you've got to have a level of confidence in the back 3 anyway. And so there will be times in the game, particularly against the 3 up front, where we may go 1-for-1, your 3 against my 3. But on other occasions, as we become more organized, as play develops and we can slow down the attack, given the ball in this example is with the number 3, your left-sided fullback, we would expect that the weak side midfield player, the number 11 in this case, would track back to provide balance to the back 3 as they get drawn across the field. So I think 2 ways that I would approach that 3 players playing 1v1 at the back, and then the weak side midfield player dropping back. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Yeah, I still think I win, but that's okay.
Okay, well, that's also, of course, a matter of opinion. So my question for you, Ian, is that in this system, we are going to try and encourage your goalkeeper to get the ball out into the wide areas. So we get the ball to your fullbacks. And then that will help us to prevent you playing the ball essentially through the strength of your team, which is straight down the middle, your 2 9s, your 6, your 8, and your 10. So my question is, what other players in your systems will provide you with the width once your fullbacks have received the ball?
Yeah, fair enough. Well, certainly, if for whatever reason your team is willing to let us get out here through our fullbacks, I'm going to expect my 7 and, my 11, and then on the other side where my 7 would be, to offer advanced width as well. And possibly my goalkeeper doesn't have to play to the fullback. If my goalkeeper has good distribution ability, maybe he or she can actually go straight to 7 and 11. That, in my opinion, will require your team to stretch and give us a little bit more space in the midfield and maybe loosen you up. And then should we have any real issues of losing the ball out there, if my centre-backs have stayed at home and my number 6 is constant, I feel like I can defend a counter-attack should we turn the ball over in these wide spaces that you've given us, because again, 4, 5, and 6 provide the fulcrum for my defending unit.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the reverse. So now the 1-3-5-2 is attacking the 1-4-3-3, and I'll start off here, Ian, as the attacking team. And my question to you is, how will you defend against our midfield of 5 with your midfield of 3 without sacrificing the height provided by your number 11, your number 9, and your number 7?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I certainly would expect 7 and 11, be they determine themselves to be wide attackers or wide midfielders, to be willing to double down and perhaps create pressure from the other side of the ball. So I'm not completely abdicating the responsibility of 7 and 11. But if your system is to have 2 up front, 2 number 9s, I feel comfortable with 4 and 5 engaging them. But I'm going to have to let my fullbacks 3 and 2 step out because of the way that you're spread so widely with 5 in the midfield. And the question then becomes, how can I empower number 2 to go out here, number 3 or number 2 to go out and leave my 2 centre backs essentially 2 on 2? And as I probably alluded to at the very beginning, everything is back to this number 6, because if this number 6 will stay home and sometimes they almost drop in to be a 3rd centre back, be it in front of 4 and 5 or behind 4 and 5, then 2 and 3 can step up into your midfield and help us with the numerical imbalance.
Well, that's great. Thanks, Ian. Now your question for me.
Well, I've clearly stunted all of your attacking ideas because of this number 6 screening the service into your 2 number 9s, and I've allowed my 2 fullbacks to go up and engage your 7 and 11. So my question is to you is, if I've got that screening number 6, how are you gonna deal with him?
Well, that's a good question, but I think we've answered it, because you've fallen into our trap by sending your number 3 and your number 2 high to address the width that we have with our number 7 and number 11. So what that does for us is creates now spaces between your fullbacks and your central defenders for our number 9s to get a little bit wider than they may look in this diagram, which means that the number 6 for your defending team will have to choose one side or other, but won't be able to defend both. The other way, of course, to do this is to change the angle of penetration from being a straight penetration to try and get it to our 9s, which of course the 6 can probably cut out, but then instead to go wide first and then go into the spaces and play essentially around your number 6. So I think that would be one or two solutions for that particular scenario.
Fair enough.
So let's talk now about the 1-4-3-3 versus the 1-4-5-1. And as these are both your formations, I'll ask you the questions and then you can certainly respond. So let's talk firstly about the 1-4-3-3 attacking, and you're going in this direction against the 1-4-5-1 defending in yellow, going in this direction. And my first question related to attacking is your two fullbacks will move forward to create 5 in midfield, a 1-2-5-3 shape. And how would you deal with those extra players in midfield to defend against?
Okay, so given that we've already got a 5-man midfield, if the opponent does indeed run both fullbacks forward, I still have an even numbered situation that I feel that I could potentially adequately deal with. And furthermore, I might encourage one of my fullbacks to step up as well. So I feel comfortable that even if the two red fullbacks do indeed push on, I've got adequate numbers in the midfield to go essentially one-on-one, as need be, man-to-man, and then I might contribute an additional fullback from the back line on the strong side if absolutely necessary.
Okay, that's great. And then on the other side, the 1-4-5-1 now defending with a numerical advantage in the back line, 4 in the back line, and with a midfield line of 5, you can certainly play the yellow team with a zonal defensive strategy that will occupy almost the whole width of the field. So how will the 1-4-3-3 find space in high positions to progress the ball forward?
I think it's a very good question, because I think the 4-5-1 does pose this real challenge. Clearly, if the opponent in the 4-5-1 is very deep and very compact, the technical ability of 8 and 10 to unlock them in tight spaces could be key, and or the superior athletic 1v1 abilities of 7 and 11 could be key too. So I'd certainly try to break them down with technique and tactics initially. And certainly by keeping the ball on the ground and trying to break through these deep lines of pressure. However, I would always be willing to be a little bit more direct against a packed-in opponent. So maybe some shots from distance to draw them out, occasionally maybe dropping a ball in behind them into corner spaces, so now they're turning and facing the other way. And I definitely think in the 1-4-3-3, it will be key to maintain as much width as possible in the attacking final third as possible until the last moment when we want to crash into the box. So certainly a commitment to play initially, and then break them down with a little bit more direct play, and then of course maintaining width throughout. That would be my thoughts.
Now we're going to look at the other side. So we're now the question is being posed for the 1-4-5-1 attacking question. And the question relates to the 4 at the back marking essentially one striker. And the question pertains to how do you maintain the field coverage of the back 4 and then simultaneously be able to support the overrun midfield with only 3 versus 5 in midfield?
It's a good question. I think it's a very valid one. I think it's actually diagrammed here a little bit. So the number 11 currently is on the weak side from my perspective. And so I would be looking for my wide players to compact on the weak side. So he may not come back in here for a man-to-man marking responsibility, but this is balancing off the threat of the opponent coming through the space indicated here by the arrows. If my number 11 recovers but stays very wide, he's a great outlet pass should we win it, but he's not dealing with the issues of this player and this player, especially if our number 3 gets drawn across. Another way to do it would be to step the number 3 up into the midfield, which would require 4 and 5 to manage an offside line. But certainly, I'm not going to expect 3 players, 7, 9, and 11, when I play in the 1-4-3-3, regardless of the opposing formation. Theirs is not to just stand on the halfway line and wait to have the ball played to them. They have to work back on the strong and the weak side.
So Ian, now looking at the 1-4-5-1 as an attacking unit, let's look at the role of the 3 strikers essentially to try and put high pressure now on these 4 defenders. And the question really is, how do you then look to build from the back after receiving this level of high pressure from the 1-4-3-3?
Yeah, so if we were to rewind this picture, the ball's in the hands of my goalkeeper. My number 2 is probably here. My number 3 is here, maybe 4, 5, and we're making this commitment to play out the back because this is very much part of the modern game and very encouraged in youth player development. The absolute first thing I would say is have faith, especially in training. Keep working at it. It won't always be successful if you do have this intense pressure from 3 front runners from the opponent, but have faith. If that pressure is good, can we now bypass and find our number 6 or possibly our number 8 and number 10 with meaningful distribution? And failing all of that, if we're in the game situation and the pressure of the front 3 from the opponent is really good and we haven't developed the skills to build out the back in the game scenario yet, then occasionally a route 1, I will take that. And of course, the idea of an occasional route 1 ball is that it might encourage or persuade 7, 9, and 11 to drop off, and then as a counter option, allow us to build from the back. So a blend of approaches based on my knowledge of my players, but having faith and at the same time being willing to be pragmatic and utilitarian as necessary.
Okay, now we move to the 1-4-3-3, Ian's formation against Paul Marco's 1-4-4-2. And I know you have a question for me as it pertains to the 1-4-4-2 defending.
Yeah, my question's pretty straightforward. If you're in a 1-4-4-2 and I've got 3 players in the midfield and critically a number 10 player, how do you account for that number 10 player if I've got 3 in the central midfield and you've only got 2?
Well, I think the key here is that we wouldn't have necessarily only 2, given that Paul Marco had proposed to keep with the diamond. So with the diamond and a very narrow diamond in midfield, as he explained it, the number 6 certainly would be looking to pick up the highest of the midfield players that you have, at the same time providing some level of a screen. But because of the close proximity the 8 and the 10 has to the number 6, then there would be times when the 6 may have their hands full, and so now the number 8 on either side would then track back the number 10. So I think given the nature of how Paul had set up the central midfield, that'd be the way that we would deal with forward runs by your central midfield.
Fair enough.
Okay, and then looking at the opposite side of the ball and deploying 2 strikers, the number 9s wide, as we described in the earlier slides, and forcing your goalkeeper to play inside this time. So instead of you playing outside, we would deploy the players, the number 9s wide, to prevent them going to the fullback. How will the 1-4-3-3 avoid the trap of playing to your central defenders and then receiving pressure from our diamond midfield?
Yeah, if you really think you're going to be in a diamond, then my 7 and 11s are going to check back to receive distribution from the goalkeeper. So we won't necessarily go to our centre backs or even our fullbacks. We're going to bypass the line and essentially distribute into the midfield, because if your 4 in the diamond are so narrow, we'll go over or around your 2 number 9s who are set wider into spaces behind them, because your 9s aren't going to track back as radically as you think. So I feel pretty confident that you can try to force us centrally, but we won't have to go there. And even if we did, occasionally just rolling it into a number 5 here who immediately gives it back will shift your diamond and give us space. But I think my goalkeeper distributes still into wide spaces, but perhaps 1 line ahead of his 2 fullbacks into his checking back 7s and 11s.
Okay. So now looking at the 1-4-4-2 in an attacking environment, one of the things that we certainly discussed in the presentation was the idea that the 8, the 10, and the number 8 are often running in behind the 2 strikers. So with your system of the 1-4-3-3 and having 3 central midfield players, how would you then cope with our 3 players running forward and the number 9s playing high and narrow?
Yeah, well, again, I'm going to be the broken record, but express the value of the number 6. So he or she is going to sit. I'm going to ask 8 and 10 to put good pressure on the ball, because if 8 and 10 put good pressure on the ball, then the delivery in behind us will become impossible. Our goalkeeper has the ability to sweep a keep 2 and pick up any balls that are overhit in there, should they be overhit. So 6 is going to prevent the service. 8 and 10 are going to deny the ability to pass forward. Number 1 is going to sweep up behind should we need him to. The other thing we're going to ask them to do is 8 and 10, occasionally 8 and 10 will have to track with runners into recovery positions. That will be an occasional thing, but we'd be prepared to do it. And then finally, if your team is in a narrow diamond and you're not pushing your fullbacks in, then my 3 and my 2 are coming around for additional cover. So frankly, the scenario you paint poses no significant concern to me right now. And then I get to ask you a question. How will your 4-4-2 get my number 6 to shift and create space for your 2 number 9s? Because I've pretty much cemented my number 6 into the ground right now.
Well, and that's good that number 6 is so immobile and so cemented, because what we would do in this scenario is a couple of things. Firstly, we would have the number 9s potentially drop a little bit deeper, so they'll come and receive the ball potentially either alongside or just in front of the number 6. So engage the number 6 in the play, and as they do that, we would have the number 8s running on beyond the number 9 that's checked. So that would create some problems, certainly for the cemented number 6, your words, not mine, and also the immobile central defenders. The second thing that we would do is remember that the number 9s are expected to track back wide, and by doing so, their starting positions will often be in these wide positions. So if your number 6 is in the middle, then if we have our number 9 starting from wide positions, I don't see that the number 6 can cover both number 9s. So that would be how we would address that. Right, Ian, now the systems opposed are the 1-3-5-2 and the 1-4-4-2. The 1-3-5-2 that I presented and the 1-4-4-2 that I'm presenting on behalf of Paul Marco. So please go ahead.
Yeah, so if this is an attacking question for the number 9, for the 1-3-5-2. So if the opponent's number 9 will need to track back to 7 and 11 constantly, resulting in the starting position for the number 9 becoming very deep, how will you coach to prevent the 1-4-4-2 from spending most of the game defending deep if there is no one high to pass to? So if you're going to be in this diamond, you're asking a lot of your number 9s, and the question is, how do your number 9s then be available for counter-attacking and staying close to the opposing goal?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that this isn't just a system that we've decided on the fly. This is one we've worked at a lot in training. So we've chosen a system where the number 9s are tracking back, and those players are accustomed to do so often in training and obviously in the match. So for them, it's not alien to them to be able to do that. And so as they track back, it's part of the strategy. It's not new to them. But what we will do is, as 9s track back, that gives us then the ability for us to rotate the central midfield players 10, 8, and 8 to provide that height as the 9s drop back. So somewhat unusually, as 9 drop back, our strikers, the ones that we would normally put in front of goal, we would now put the 8s, the 10s into slightly higher positions.
Fair enough. Okay, and then the other question for the 3-5-2 is how will you attack the diamond midfield? How will you go about unlocking the diamond in midfield?
Yeah, and I think, Ian, that one of the challenges with a very narrow central midfield players is, of course, is the space that's around them on either side of them. So they can't defend all areas of the field. And the way that I would certainly propose would be in the advantage of the 1-3-5-2 is to get those wide midfield players 7 and 11 engaged to play around, and even get the central midfield players, the 6 to play on the base, but then to have the 10 and the 8 actually to move wider of the diamond so that we can play around the edge of them both through the wide midfield players and the 8 and the number 10.
Okay, fair enough. And then a question for your 4-4-2. So we move forward now to the flip side, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So the question is, for the 3-5-2, your 7 and 11 have an incredible amount of workload from front to back. And how do you manage effectively the workload of your 7 and 11 on either side of the ball?
Yeah, and again, going to my point before, this isn't a system that we've just decided on the fly. It is one that we've worked on. So our 7 and 11 in this system are often very, very athletic, fit players that are used to moving lengths of the field in both directions. But of course, there is at some point a time when these players are going to need to have some break. So these are not fullbacks. They're not forwards. They are wing backs, if you like, back and forth, up and down the field. And of course, we're going to have times when the 8 and the number 10 is going to have to help out and support in slightly wider positions, given that we're reasonably narrow in the 2, 3, and the 4.
Yeah, I think it's a really important consideration when we as coaches suggest to a player that he or she is our 7, 11, and how they interpret that. So I think your interpretation of them as wing backs with perhaps a primary defensive responsibility, but freedom to go forward at the right time is really helpful, because if you designate them full backs, then you end up with a back 5. If you designate them attacking midfielders, wingers, sometimes you don't get any cover out of them at all. So I really like that notion of wing back in the way that you explain it. And then a question now for the 4-4-2. Should your 4-4-2 be very deep, perhaps even turned around facing their own goal line? How do you deal with a high press, high pressure and high up the field pressing situation of a 3-5-2? So if that 3-5-2 is in your half and you're trying to get out in difficult situations, how do you break that press?
Yeah, so potentially the 3-5-2 could send anywhere from 6 or 7 players in a high press. And in that situation, I think there's only one real solution to that, is to bypass those lines of the field as they are pressing. So if, for example, the line of confrontation is somewhere close to our box, then whether it be the goalkeeper, the fullback, or the central defenders, we've got to try and relieve that pressure by playing over the top into spaces in front of the back line, or even given that there are only 3 central defenders, the option on them into wide positions, the ball stays in place. So I think that's probably the best way to relieve the pressure, to turn the opponent and then essentially to play a high press in the other end of the field.
Fair enough.
So Ian, let's talk now about the 1-3-5-2 against the your 1-4-5-1, and let's start with me posing you a question in terms of how you would attack. So the 1-4-5-1 is willing to concede the possession to us and allow our back 3 to play around the number 9 because you've got 1 versus 3? Or will you, as the coach, be less conservative and send more of your midfield players forward to press and chase, and potentially as a result leave some space in midfield?
Sure. So let's just take for a moment here that this player with the ball from my opponent, and we're in the first 10 minutes of the game. And with this particular formation, I'm going to say to my players, let's just be quite conservative to start the game. So we'll have our bank of 4. We'll have weak side tucked in. We'll have 8, 6, and 10 in a nice triangle. And we'll be in pretty nice compact shape here. And of course, our number 9, yeah, you can play around our number 9 to start with because we've got plenty of people behind the ball and we're feeling comfortable. My answer, though, as we go on, will be now situational. So if we are trailing, if there's a particularly weak opponent, so we identify that your left back is right-footed and not very strong at delivering the ball, we're losing 1-0 or 2-0, then this entire unit will be pushed incrementally forward, and we will be able to apply pressure higher, and number 9 will be part of that pressure because he or she will be engaged with the rest of his team. So from my perspective, I'm not concerned about this particular formation's ability to chase the game, but we're quite conservative, energy conserving type formation as need be. And so with my high degree of confidence in my formation, how does your 3-5-2 threaten the 1-4-5-1 in wide spaces, given that in the 4-5-1 we have both fullbacks and wide midfielders? So we always have at least 2 players defending in the wide spaces, and you only have 1 attacking player, as I understand it.
Ian?
Yeah, I just love.
Yeah, I got terrible audio on that slide.
Yeah.
So let's do this. Let's go back to this slide, systems opposed, and then let's start that from the top and make a note. I'm going to make a note now. That's on O. Are you hearing the issues on audio or not? Ian? Can you hear me?
Me, 1 second. Can you hear me?
I can hit then, yeah.
Okay, so
I've lost you now.
okay, I'm still here.
Okay, I can hear you now. You came back in then.
Yeah, something's gone squiffy with the noise because I lost you completely for the last 3-4 minutes.
Okay, so I think it was this beginning of this slide, the 1-3-5-2 versus 1-4-5-1 defending, where we lost each other, and that's when the audio started going squiffy. So I've made a note of that. When Aaron downloads the presentation into a video format, he should be able to, or someone, I could probably do it if he can get me the file. We can go in and actually cut and then remove that section of the presentation.
Okay. So we're going to start from here. You're going to lead to the 3-5-2, right?
Yeah. Is this roughly when you think it went squiffy, or did it go before?
Well, I did my whole situational response, and then I saw you pop up with red arrows. So I had you up to the point I had you introduced this slide as far as I'm concerned, and I responded, and then I lost you at the 1451 defending question.
Okay, all right.
I said it after I asked you about the 352 threatening the 1451 in white spaces. I never heard you again.
Okay. I'm just trying to work out whether we should go back one more slide for good measure. What do you think? Should we do that?
Well, we definitely got the 442 breaking the high press. We definitely got that.
Okay.
So if we've slid to this slide and just gone on and not mentioned anything, it's fine. As long as this slide pops up,
okay,
we don't need to say anything. So I think we're okay.
All right. So I've made a note. It's around about 42 minutes where we ended up getting audio issue. And I think it is the slide that relates to this 1352. Okay. All right, then. So let's just get, so I'm asking you the question about your willingness to concede possession to us. And allowing us to play around. Okay.
I will say this once again: when you shift, maybe it's because you're the host. Static and feedback happens. It's happened consistently, and you got a lot louder for me in the latter part of the presentation. So I don't know if you shifted or did something or started moving, but I really think at your end, the more static you are, the less grief I get.
But I think the experience is same for me with you though. So I don't think it's necessarily what you and I are doing. I just think it's to do somewhat with the connection. So I'm not, there's nothing I'm doing specifically differently. No, so
okay, let's get on with
it. All right. So let's have a pause. Let's wait for 47 when it hits.
1 second. The other problem is I don't have a number 7. You never actually drew him in, so I've only got a number on this next slide. I'm missing a player.
Okay, well you can mention that.
Yeah.
You can throw me under the bus. You've done it before. It would be the first time.
I've got it. Yeah.
47:20. I'm going to start. 5 seconds. So Ian, let's look at the 1352 attacking versus the 1451 defending. And let's start with a question for you as the defending team. Is your 1451 willing to concede possession to the 1352 and specifically to our defensive 3, who by all accounts can play around your number 9, your solitary striker, and if you don't do that and you do send players forward, are you going to be a little less conservative and push your midfield players higher, knowing that you're going to give a bit of space up in midfield?
Yeah, so my answer to the question is situational, and I'll explain that a little bit. So we're anticipating this is the first 5-10 minutes of the game and the score is 0-0. So we're going to play conservatively. So my number 9, you stay high, be ready for the counter attack. My back 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, nice and conservative, in shape, marking, defending zonally as you need to. And then in my midfield, given that the ball is here, my 11 is pinched in, 8, 6, 10, and my number 7 is quite small. He's very difficult to see. He's a little lad. That's okay. So I'm comfortable. I'm very comfortable with the way I've got my team compact right now. And I'll sit like this for a while and then enjoy these wide open spaces to counterattack into, because that's the nature of how we defend and then turn it into offense in this interpretation.
Ian? Hello? Ian? Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Yeah, I lost you completely when you started to ask me the question, but we got the other question in. I don't know what's going on with the audio.
Well, I've only got 7 field players on my diagram too. I'm missing 3 players.
My God, the numbers are there, but the players have disappeared.
Yeah.
That's how I'm going to break you down.
Yeah, that's a good way of winning.
Well, I think we have to. We can't go into this slide without mentioning that. But
well, I did. I said my number 7 was really tiny. He's so tiny you can't see him.
But then you realise that also your number 10 and 8 are equally small. But
yeah, I'm missing 3.
But you can refer to those numbers as being players, and then and I don't know why they're not on there.
Yeah, I can deal with it. But
okay.
I mean, if you can't hear me, you can't hear me. I've done it once.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Aaron for this file so I can actually edit it. But I'm going to just make a note. 50 minutes. Okay, that's when we lost it. All right. Do you want to ask me my question?
My answer? Did you?
Fun?
You didn't get my answer.
I got all your answer. I could hear everything in your answer to yours, but you started to ask me a question, draw lines, and I heard nothing from you. I can still hear nothing.
This is.
You there? Can you hear me yet?
Yes.
Okay, so it looks like whatever the connections happened to the connection, it's gone a poor connection, but it's right at the end of the presentation. So what we can do is I can set up another presentation online, and we can start at these last slides and see if it's any better. Do you want to do that?
So here's what I want you to do though. First, I want you to fast forward through to the first time we lost it and the second time we lost it, so at least you can splice it together and we do the minimum but the necessary amount of work. All right?
Yeah. So what we'll do is I'm gonna create a new slide deck from here, and I'm also going to go back and I'm going to fix this diagram.
Okay. Is this going to happen this afternoon?
I can do it right now.
Right.
But let me first of all, let's make sure there's nothing missing off these diagrams, these last few. That's the first diagram and the only one, I think. Can't see any. Oh no, look, you've lost players here, haven't you?
I've got a number 9.
Well, number 9's gone. What the heck's going on here?
And number 8's gone.
Freaking hell. Any others? Let's have a look at the next ones.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I got them all there.
Yeah, that's it. That's bizarre. Okay, so I need to go and fix those. So I need to get this all done by 1 o'clock my time, so within the next 50 minutes anyway. So give me about 15 minutes. Yeah. I'll do those diagrams, set it up, and then what I'll do is I'll call you on your cell when I'm ready, and I'll email you over the new link. All right?
Sounds good. Cheers.
Okay, thanks.